cum dripping out of his mouth every time you talk.
That's not talk, that's spit!
The only time you can come up with a system that's better than America, it's a country that's more white than America.
Eat video games!
Okay.
A guy plays video games!
Done.
Do you do that with Jews?
Nope.
After discovering pussy, I dropped acid, started a band, got beat up, ripped my foreskin, went to jail, planted trees, dealt drugs, got tattoos, squatted Europe, got hustled, had some threesomes, farted, watched my friends die, lived in China, played some pranks, started a multimedia global empire, got on TV, gave myself gonorrhea, got beat up again, invented hipsters, went broke, got rich, got married, got knocked out, and had some kids. If I could go back in time and tell young me one thing, it would be the same thing I'd tell all young men. Her hole is way farther down than you think. And once you find it, your life will never be the same. Sincerely, your pal, me.
Volume 1, The Come Up Issue. Gavin McInnes was born in Hitchin, Hertfordshire, England, to a Scottish father and a Canadian mother. Their family immigrated to Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, somewhere between 1974 and 1975 when he was just 4 years old. As an immigrant growing up in a small Canadian town, Gavin developed this sense of not fitting in. His posh British accent got him routinely beaten up at school for sounding gay, which, I'm not advocating for bullying, but kind of, would get beaten out of him pretty quick. Those counterculture sensibilities carried over into his teenage years, hanging out with the punk kids and dropping acid on the reg. You can find the roots of Gavin's "f you mom" sense of humor even during this part of his life. In high school, his class was forced to endure anti-drunk driving assemblies at SKU. Gavin and his band of retarded men, in symphony with his contrarian attitude, created a pro-drunk driving club in retaliation.
They were mostly right, but our gang thought the whole thing was gay and decided to take a pro-drunk driving stance. We started a group called SAS, Students Against Drunk Driving, and competed to see who could drive the drunkest. If you couldn't find your parents' car the next day, you won.
Later that night, he'd steal his parents' friend's car and get arrested for drunk driving. He also fronted a semi-successful local band called Anal Chinook. They do radical shit to get attention on stage. Cross-dress, keep in mind this was in the 90s, fight skinheads, eat cow brains, throw poop into the crowd, which actually was just melted chocolate bars, etc. Despite being arrested, getting into fights, and yada yada yada, he'd end up graduating from Carleton University in Ottawa with a degree in English Lit. In 1992, he'd moved to Montreal and started self-publishing a comic book simply called Pervert. The illustrations were crude and not noteworthy, but what did hook people in was his style of writing and humor. In 1994, with Gavin passing the time working dead-end, go-nowhere jobs, his passion project Pervert started circulating around the city, eventually finding its way to the attention of Suroosh Alvi, the lead/sole writer for the magazine Voice of Montreal, which at the time had yet to publish its first issue. Image Interculturelle was a local francophone magazine being run by Haitians that was used as a vehicle to promote multiculturalism in the city. I'm not sure if you're up to date on the Montreal lore, but it's actually considered a bilingual city. Well, English speakers are considered like second-class citizens, but technically speaking, it is a bilingual city. I'm not kidding, by the way. This is gonna sound crazy if you haven't spent time in Montreal, but the Anglophones there are treated like Mexicans in South Park. I think that's a pretty good analogy. They took our jobs!
They took our jobs! Yeah, they're down, took our jobs!
French people in Quebec are very racist, linguists, what would you call it? Prejudice, I guess, whatever you want to call it. Their energy towards people that aren't like native Quebec, even like France French people can get it there. If you're not like native Quebec French, there's a very much like a vibe, an energy of go back to your country. Despite that, English people do live there, and Image Interculturelle wanted to expand into that untapped English reader market. So they created an English version of the magazine called Voice of Montreal. They'd hire a newly sober heroin addict, Suroosh Alvi, to run the publication, who sobered up because God came and spoke to him and told him to make content or whatever. I'm paraphrasing. The mandate from his Haitian overseers was to write articles that were essentially, there's an insert racial minority festival going on next month. Here's 16 reasons you should go check it out. You know, the type of article that's written for people that come from that one village. Village People, people who exclusively listen to Animal Crossing remixes. But Suroosh ignored his Village People mandate and would instead cover things he was actually interested in. Album reviews, skateboarding culture, streetwear. He had his finger on the pulse of what 20-year-olds thought was cool at the time. Suroosh had been hired as the sole employee to write the entire first issue. Well, not just writing, he had to do everything, placing the images, selling the ads. Needless to say, he was a bit overwhelmed. While Suroosh was trying to figure out what he was even doing, he would be contacted by Gavin. A mutual friend of theirs named Rufus told Gavin to apply to Voice of Montreal to draw comics for its first issue. After a long conversation where the two seemed to have a shared vision of where they could take it, Suroosh offered Gavin the position of head editor, which he rejected. A few days later though, Gavin, going through an existential episode at the time, would have an epiphany, realizing that he was meant for something greater, to make an impact on the world, which had just been presented to him on a silver platter. A magazine where he could be in complete creative control. Gavin begged Suroosh for the job, but unfortunately since their meeting, Suroosh had actually spoken to Image Interculturelle about hiring more employees who shot the idea down. This is going to be a little complicated, so bear with me here. The magazine itself was being funded by government grants. In Canada, there's various grant programs that use taxpayer money to fund small and large businesses, especially in the arts. A system that could be easily abused and is the reason why most movies, TV shows, and music that emanate from Canada is not good. You can fund an entire record label based off mostly government grants while the actual end product bombs critically and financially. It's a bit of a half-glass dilemma, whether you look at it as being half full or half empty. If the glass is full of piss, it's gonna taste like piss. Unless if you're into piss play. On top of the government grants, Montreal, or its province Quebec, has a tax-subsidized work placement program for the unemployed, something Image Interculturelle was also taking advantage of, meaning all of its employees would need to be on welfare, so it didn't actually have to pay them, it could be covered by taxpayer funds.
Voice of Montreal was a multicultural paper that was supposed to document the Polish parade is in January, and the Haitian Caribbean Bongo Parade is, we'll be playing oil drums on McGill Avenue on March, which is why they got a grant. And they were using us as a little cash cow where they'd lock us in a room and they would get checks. They didn't have to pay for us because we were through welfare. And I would see them high-fiving each other and doing shit, and we realized this is a fucking scam. We're in a Russian communist system, and we are the Department of Multiculturalism.
Despite the vulturistic business practices of Image Interculturelle, Gavin was still eager to join Voice of Montreal, so he crossed his eyes, pretended to be retarded, and went on welfare so he could get hired through this program.
So I was a cartoonist at the time, and he said to me, do you want to do cartoons for this new newspaper? We knew some of the same people. And I go, sure, yeah, I'll do a comic strip. And he goes, actually, can you just be the editor? Like, wait, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I said, okay. And then he goes, you have to be on welfare. And I go, okay. So I went to the welfare office cross-eyed, which if you ever want to get on welfare, you have to go in cross-eyed. And you're like, hi, I'm having some trouble figuring my life out, and I would need some welfare to have in my body. Okay. The trick to getting on welfare is you fill out the forms with your left hand, so all the writing is up. So I did all that. I got on like that. I think the woman gave me $100 too. She was like, hold on a second.
You look like you could use a hot meal.
A year into Voice of Montreal's publication, Gavin was fed up with making no money and decided to take over the ad sales from the mentally ill black lady that had been hired. His words, not mine. Gavin's brutish style didn't really lend itself well to that side of the business, so instead he convinced an old friend / bandmate, Shane Smith, to go on welfare and join Voice of Montreal as its head of sales. The magazine didn't end up being what Gavin, Suroosh, and Shane had envisioned, feeling like they were being exploited by the higher-ups at Image Interculturelle, so the trio would leave the magazine, dropping the O from Voice and creating their own magazine called Vice, which Image Interculturelle sued them for, and Vice settled out of court for $35,000.
And looked it up.
Volume 2, The Voice of Vice issue. Gavin, Suroosh, and Shane would eat and sleep in a loft in Montreal during the early days of Vice.
You know, in those days, like it was really seat of the pants. Like I know now it's this big multi-million-dollar, you know, enterprise, but it really was. It was three guys living in a loft. You know, like they were living in the loft and working in the loft. So that, you know, Shane and Gavin had their beds and a little fridge and a shelf with canned goods.
And Gavin slept on this gross futon with like cowboy and Indian wallpaper from an ancient era.
For example, at one point they offered me a quarter of the company for like 25 or 30,000, and I turned them down. I mean, you know, I thought I'd be throwing my money away, and to be fair, like I didn't want to work that hard. These guys were working, you know, I give them all the credit. They were working like day and night and day and night and day and night.
Shane would serve as the businessman who would eventually grow Vice into the media empire it had become, or I guess it once was. Suroosh, on the other hand, would cover pop culture, but the true voice of Vice would be that of Gavin McInnes.
I approached writing from a non-writing standpoint. A lot of writers who went to journalism school, they read Hunter S. Thompson, and they had this whole persona built up in their heads, and it was the same intro too. I woke up hungover, 2 hours late for the interview. Luckily, Ghostface was late too. Two guys on the same page of shit or something. That's not you. Just be yourself. I was nervous to meet Ghostface. I'm a huge Wu-Tang fan, and then I meet him, and he's this old 45-year-old black dude, just like a toddler,
who's really into food.
Pretty funny, yeah. And I would say to writers, I go, just write a letter to your brother and take out the inside jokes. Write all caps and write things like okay. One thing I could say about the writing back then, and maybe the magazine's influence, was that we taught people to just write like themselves.
You see, the magazine was not this instant overnight success. Gavin, Suroosh, and Shane had to scratch and claw their way to the top, lying to business partners and readers along the way. For instance, in the baby stages of Vice, Gavin would write 80% of the articles, many of which would appear under pseudonyms, making it look like they had a fully fleshed out, diverse writing staff, something requested by the advertisers.
I wrote about 80% of it. And we tried to get, you need more blacks writing, you need more women writing. In order to meet those demands, I eventually just had to become these blacks and women. Well, I'd also, the few freelance we did, I'd also force them into my mold.
Yeah. Well, people complain that you'd add paragraphs to their
shit. And my attitude with that was, if your writing is so shitty that it needs me to add 2 paragraphs, I can't wait for you to quit.
Another dirty tactic implemented by Vice at this time was Shane exchanging free ad space for low volume distribution in cafes, skate shops, etc. across Canada. I'm talking like a handful of issues, like sending 1 or 2 issues to a skateboard shop. He would then use this fact as a way to say that they were distributed nationally to other potential advertisers, tricking them into thinking that they were bigger than they actually were and had more reach than they actually did. A method that proved successful growing their brand in the early days, and one that they'd employ across the border, helping them break into the New York market. The trio were undeniable. Anything that would block their path to success would get run through like that one girl we all knew from high school.
We went national in 1996 by offering radio stations and record stores free ads if they stuck us in cafes and record shops. Soon we were using that same technique across the border to get Vice into New York and LA. Things started to get exciting. I worked my ass off every waking moment and cut costs to the point where we were doing the whole thing for free. Paying a designer was expensive, so I learned desktop publishing and took over that job. I shot the pictures myself, wrote the articles, edited them, and laid them out. Suroosh helped with editorial and focused on music. He had this incredible ear and could foresee the future of bands. Shane always had a better work ethic than us, but being independent really put things into overdrive. He traveled by bus to other cities and had meetings with corporate heads who had no idea how he got in there. We couldn't afford lawyers, so deals were done with handshakes, and if someone f***ed us over, they were dead. We were banned and sued and threatened and ripped off, but the only thing that could have stopped us was murder. We sent drugs to clients in the mail and got violent with competition and regularly f***ed the gross old cougars in charge of buying ad space. Rival magazines accused us of eating our way to the top.
With Vice now firing on all cylinders, with their gonzo journalism, publishing popular articles like the do's and don'ts of fashion, legacy media would begin to cover their meteoric rise. Shane, during an interview, lied and told a reporter that a local dot-com billionaire, Richard Zalwinski, had purchased Vice. Richard made his money as an early investor in many websites and Soft Logic, the studio behind the VFX of Jurassic Park. Completely forgetting this is something Shane even said, being it an offhand lie, Richard ended up seeing the article and calling Vice. He was impressed by their balls and asked them to meet for an acquisition offer for somewhere between $1 and $4 million. The boys accepted, and the mag moved their offices from Montreal to New York.
So Richard Sawinski says, no, Shane right there said, yeah, Richard Sawinski, he's buying us and we're moving to New York. No, he's buying us, sorry. And Richard Sawinski's son, he goes, I appreciate the hubris. He had like a nerdy voice. And he goes, tell you what, if you could put together a one-page business plan, I will invest. So we stayed up all night. We put together a business plan. We said we're worth $1 million, I think. No, 4 million. So he paid us $1 million, 3 each. And he said, look, if you're big in Montreal, you're big in Canada. You're big in New York. You're big in the world. Let's move to New York. And we were like, yep.
Richard, wanting to expand Vice beyond the scope of being a gauche magazine, began opening retail stores, selling products advertised in the magazine, as well as selling streetwear. They'd also opened other offshoot businesses like a record label. And during this time, Gavin started to realize that selling the company to Richard also meant selling its soul.
Our clothing line was even worse, and I couldn't stay on top of the sprawl. Every day there were new people in the office whom I didn't recognize. This wasn't our company anymore. The turning point for me was during a meeting about some French homo who had begun choosing products for us to buy en masse and sell on the site. He was a chubby man with corny streetwear, but I liked him enough. Now, Gavin, the stranger leading the board meeting said, you're going to be working with him, so we want to make sure you guys get along. Sure, I said, shrugging. I love facts. The conference room was full of faces I didn't recognize, and those were the faces that didn't laugh. The next day, I got pulled aside by some office manager type who told me I was going to have to do sensitivity training. I thought he was kidding. The training consisted of my sitting with a lawyer uptown who thought the whole thing was as stupid as I did. I know, she said. It doesn't make any sense. You said you love them. I'm just telling you what the law is.
On September 11th, 2001, a couple of planes flew into a couple of buildings, bringing them down with the help of the CIA and their C4. This, like for many people, activated Gavin's political views. So it was around this time that Gavin started writing socio-political pieces in Vice. Now Vice, and Shane, and Suroosh are Canadian, so they default to liberals. Gavin, after the whole tower thing, and reading the book The Death of the West by Pat Buchanan, began his path to becoming a conservative. This political divide, plus Gavin's "you mom" attitude, would begin to brew turmoil between the founders and catch himself some heat with the mainstream media. The first of which was in 2002. The trio did an interview with the New York Press where the cover photo was Gavin dressed as a skinhead, Suroosh as the victim of a hate crime, and Shane as a soccer hooligan. In the interview, Gavin made a joke when talking about hating white hipsters, saying, quote, "At least they're white." That statement, out of context with the skinhead photo, got Vice in trouble with the press, and with Gavin refusing to backpedal and apologize, Shane had to do so on his behalf. In 2002, he wrote an anti-liberal article called Hip to be Square, which again ruffled some feathers in the press. In 2003, during an interview with the New York Times, he'd say, quote, "I love being white and I think it's something to be very proud of," going on to say, "I don't want our culture diluted. We need to close the borders now and let everyone assimilate to a Western, white, English-speaking way of life." This would stoke the flames of post-9/11 xenophobia. But in retrospect, Gavin said he misspoke and he shouldn't have used the term white and just said Western. The point I'm trying to illustrate here is that at the time, he had early onset alt-right politics. Because I don't think the term alt-right had actually even been coined yet. Ironically, the way mass immigration is in the West now, these are considered moderate views. But either way, Gavin had nationalist views that were clashing with Vice and its two founders. By this point, the company was bleeding money. Wasteful spending on equipment, renting an office space that was much larger and more extravagant than they needed. The tech sector's approach to business, which is spend now and make money later, most likely, wasn't sitting well with the trio, who had built the company with a DIY counterculture mentality. When they were running it, they saved every dollar they could, making sure they were operating as lean as possible, expecting Vice to go tits up at any moment. The company, unbeknownst to anyone but Richard, would hit hard times financially, and the commander-in-chief started going MIA, missing in action. Beginning to catch on to the financial woes, one day the trio drove out to Nantucket, Massachusetts, to Richard's house to confront him about the financial state of the company.
We wanted to know how much money the company had and how long it was going to last. Hard to say, Richard said playfully. All right, Shane said. A year? Richard shook his head. 6 months? I asked. Richard shook his head. A day? Suroosh asked, almost kidding. When we finally realized Richard was completely out of money and the lease was already way past eviction, we went, whoa! the way they did in Animal House after they killed that horse.
Richard messed up the money for Vice royally. This was during the .com bubble, so everyone wanted to get in on what was going to be the next Facebook or Google or Amazon, even internet blogs. The thought process behind this was at some point in the undetermined future, if you invested, dump trucks full of blue faces would be filling your empty pool to the brim. So you could go full on Scrooge McDuck, which is a reference from like the 40s, but something like more modern. So they could live their life like they were in a rap music video. Foreign broads, foreign cars, diamond chains, and saying Nick. That was Richard's mindset. In his hubris, Richard even offered the trio the ability to trade the money he had given them when they bought Vice, about $1 million each, for shares in the company at book value. This is important. Knowing the value of this offer, the clever Shane Smith asked Richard to put this in writing immediately, which he did. But the trio kept their money until that bubble burst. Vice was in millions of dollars of debt thanks to Richard, but what really screwed him over was that offer he made to Shane, who made him put it in writing. You see, there was no time limits on the contract, so book value currently was worth way less than it had just a year prior. Gavin, Shane, and Suroosh pooled every last dollar they had, draining their bank accounts, and bought back Vice from Richard, regaining complete control over the brand for pennies on the dollar, but were now more broke compared to when they were on welfare. They'd fire the entire staff at Vice and strip every last salvageable item from the lavish New York offices and moved into the back of a warehouse owned by the clothing company 555 Soul, whom they'd had a working relationship with. Moving the offices from upper-class Manhattan to a pre-gentrified and future hipster capital of the world, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Shane and Suroosh would then spend 100% of their time putting out fires, like dealing with debt collectors, while Gavin, just like in the early days, became the sole writer for Vice, even picking up freelance work from publications in the UK just to keep the lights on. This grind would go on for 2 long years until they were able to get back on their feet. But when they did, Vice would reach its final anime villain form, a bukkake of punk rock depravity. With America still licking its wounds in the post-9/11 world, Vice slid into the hearts of the youth with their Rockstar starter kit articles. This was in the era of Jackass, South Park, Eminem, the good Eminem, and Opie and Anthony. Cheap plug, check out my 2-hour Opie and Anthony documentary video currently live on. Okay, let's just move on. The world was dark and people wanted to be entertained, removed from it all, and Vice filled that void. With the company in a healthy financial state, they'd expand once again, but this time into video media, spawning VBS TV, an online video streaming platform, the precursor to Vice.com basically, which for the time was extremely forward-thinking and done in collaboration with MTV. The company opened a UK publication in 2002, and in 2005, the UK's Channel 4, a very popular TV channel out there, released a parody sitcom called Nathan Barley, with the titular character being a straight parody of Gavin, a wild and unhinged reporter who worked at Sugar Ape, a magazine which parodied Vice. Gavin by this point had become the undeniable voice of Vice. His fashion sense and ability to make you think that anything was gay would label him the godfather of hipsters, often being accredited as the movement's creator. Keep in mind, this was way before being a hipster was gay. Shane, on the other hand, like many rock bands in the past, started to resent not being the centerpiece of the brand. This would begin Shane's return to creating content, and would eventually evolve into him becoming the face of Vice in the 2010s. I'm sure you've seen a Vice documentary with him as a star. In 2006, Shane, Gavin, David Cross, Johnny Knoxville, David Cho, and many more would co-host a show called The Vice Guide to Travel, that play on the popular style of article, The Vice Guide to insert topic from the magazine. This would serve as the blueprint to what their website, YouTube channel, and later network TV channel would become. Gavin would also guest feature in an episode of the legendary Canadian comedy show Kenny vs. Benny in season 3, episode 7, as the judge in the Who Is Cooler competition.
You look like an idiot right now.
Okay, you know what?
You dressing up like that, that's a fail. Say you
okay,
were,
so then I'll be myself.
Say you were that guy.
Okay.
Say you were that guy.
Yeah.
That would be, I'd be like, who is this
A fucking cool guy, come on!
You're wearing
motorcycles,
a
like
blouse.
chicks. What?
You're wearing a woman's tie-dye blouse.
This is not a woman's tie-dye blouse. It's a little small for me.
I'm smoking Indonesian cigarettes. I'm not inhaling.
By 2007, Vice had 13 foreign editions being published around the globe. The magazine never moved away from its core values of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but began covering more serious topics as well, such as the war in Iraq and later the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine, which was being covered by a young Tim Pool, who would later create a media empire of his own. Life during this time period was a scene out of The Wolf of Wall Street. Example, they had a 10-year anniversary party where they actually had midget tossing and a giant projector playing Japanese puke porn. The company was doubling in size every year and making more money than they did in the peak of the Richard Zawinski era. But every party has its end, and for Gavin, his would approach rapidly. In 2006, Shane Smith began talking about a merger with media giant Viacom. This led to everything Gavin wanting to do having to be approved by lawyers. A lot of his ideas were shot down, and this would build frustration in Vice's voice. He was the creative visionary behind a multimedia empire that he helped create. He felt that Shane was letting it be essayed by clean-shaven white guys in tan suits. Here's Gavin reminiscing on a bit featuring David Cross, which had been left out of the final edit to the Vice Guide to Travel.
For a travel DVD we did with Viacom, Cross and I set up an elaborate prank where we went to China and used the cheap labor there to outsource apple pies that came with an American flag in the center and played the Star-Spangled Banner. This ended up on the DVD extras. I was flabbergasted. There are times when you do something that you think is funny, but you understand if others disagree. Our China footage was not one of those things. I did a web series with Eva Mendes that was canned. I shot bits with Jimmy Kimmel, Sarah Silverman, Zach Galifianakis, and dozens more, but nothing took. It became pretty clear this was no longer the old Vice, or what Shane called the Gavin Show.
Gavin, sensing the changing tides within the organization and realizing the voice of Vice could no longer be, began to negotiate his exit in 2007. And in 2008, he would sell his shares in the company for an undisclosed amount of money, but to quote the man himself, an obscene amount of money. I saw 30 million floating around, but I couldn't confirm that. Gavin cites creative differences as the reason for his departure, while in an October 2007 article, Shane said it was due to Gavin's politics, saying, quote, Gavin liked to push buttons and he got a lot of personal notoriety for dealing with race issues. This is not what we're about. It's never what we've been about, and it's not the way we want to go. After his departure, Gavin would never speak to Shane and Suroosh again. Volume 3, The Postpartum Issue. After his departure, he purchased some land and invested in the stock market, but ultimately was toiling away in obscurity, not sure how to reset after reaching the zenith of his career. He'd get married, have some kids, find God, but still felt that he had lost all sense of professional purpose. He knew he needed to find the next thing, to attack the next obstacle, but didn't even know where to look. To quote the man himself, men don't get blowjobs in sweatpants. This was a decade before black British guys made them cool, though. He'd go full throttle into boxing training as a way to clear his mind, and after getting beaten up during a tough sparring session, he'd finally have his post-Vice epiphany. Do what you've always done. Make people laugh. Gavin would go through a bunch of failure to launch projects during this rebuild period. He and a handful of ex-Vice employees started a company called Street Boners and TV Carnage. He wrote 2 screenplays that didn't get picked up, started a hardcore punk band who broke up. He had pilot shows on both Comedy Central and Adult Swim that didn't take off, the latter of which being him voicing Mick, an anthropomorphic soccer ball in the Aqua Team Hunger Force spin-off show. He was a writer for a Justin Theroux HBO show that was canceled. He sold a show called America and $0 a Day to the Travel Channel, who canceled it after the first episode. He did a Netflix documentary on a movie watching competition, which was canceled. He made a sketch comedy movie called Gavin McInnes is a Asshole, that bombed. He wrote a book called Street Boners, that bombed. He started doing stand-up, made a YouTube channel, and had a short film that played at Sundance called Asshole. Regardless of Gavin's abysmal KD ratio in the post-Vice era, he'd finally find success when hiring his friend Sebastian to handle marketing and brand deals for his YouTube channel. Sebastian managed to get a ton of ads, and one of these ads ended up going viral. It was a comedy sketch called How to Piss in Public, which is self-explanatory.
When you teach your brain that you can piss whenever you want, it can bite you in the ass when you're asleep. It's called sleep pissing. And what it is urinary arrogance. So you'll not wake up in the middle of the night. You'll get up asleep and go, I had a piss, but I'm the king. Psst. You'll pee on your computer, your bed, your wife, your dog, your chair. I would piss in my chest of drawers, in my t-shirts and stuff.
But the video had actually been an integrated ad for Vans, as Vans let Gavin pee on a pair of Vans shoes in the video. The video went super viral, racking up over 1 million views, and Sebastian was promoted to Gavin's business manager. In 2010, they created a marketing company called Rooster New York, because penis, focusing on making sketches and funny commercials.
Gonna give me a hand here, getting something to eat, and something simple like a chip patty or maybe a Jimmy Dodger, and then a pint of, I don't know, McCune's Lager or Caledonian 80.
I'm not aware of any meetings about thing without Mahatma Johnny Georgia and Joni Chitpachi.
Oh, for f***'s sakes.
They did a commercial to promote T-Pain's album Revolver, where he rap battled Kevin Hart, which had blown up, getting 12 million views.
My only request was for him to stand up when he talking to me. I kill niggas, hit him below the logo. He's nothing but a gay midget, a low blow.
Side note, in 2023, Gavin and his co-host Ryan Katsu Rivera, we'll mention him more later, were watching clips from Bar Rescue when T-Pain popped up randomly in the episode. This prompts Gavin to bring up a story of working with T-Pain behind the scenes, which ends in Gavin rap battling Ryan, who was LARPing as John Taffer, the host of Bar Rescue.
You think you're so cool with those glasses? Let me tell you something. Your rhymes are slow as molasses, and they ain't sweet. In fact, they stink like feet. Do I want to walk into your restaurant? I'm not going to eat. I'm going to shut it down because you're a clown.
That was actually pretty good.
Thanks.
All right, you won.
The success of that sketch led to them making commercials for Microsoft, Kraft, Levi's, and Nissan. Rooster New York evolved into an ad agency working with brands to, quote, make ads for people who hate ads. They'd get acquired by another larger company for a boatload of cash. In 2012, Gavin penned a memoir called How to Piss in Public, which for marketing reasons was rebranded to The Death of Cool. He'd released an audiobook version, which he read himself, which I used a free trial from Audible and stole the audio file and converted it using a free online converter and used clips for it in this video. Thank you, Gavin. In 2013, Gavin made a documentary called The Brotherhood of the Traveling Rants and starred and co-wrote a movie called How to Be a Man. Outside of doing ads and multimedia stuff, Gavin also did stick to his core of writing articles. In 2011, Gavin, who already had political takes at Vice, dove into that world more deeply, being hired as a columnist at Tacky Mag. Well, I don't mean politics necessarily in the modern version of the word. Like, he wasn't writing articles on the efficacy versus the morality of Mayor Giuliani's Stop and Frisk campaign. Or maybe he did, I don't know. I'm sure editor Chris's bitch ass will have some graphics correcting me if I'm wrong. Hey Chris, here's an idea. Why don't you spend more time actually watching the video you're editing so you could find out whether or not I say something stupid or mispronounce a word that makes me look like a freaking moron. Thanks for letting me put that out, guy. I thought we were supposed to be on a team. For prosperity's sake, which is a word you probably wouldn't understand if you do need me to explain the homeless bit. I mean more that Gavin writes political articles in the sense of what's being discussed by real humans, like how people actually feel about interracial marriage. His wife is Indian, by the way, feather not dot. Or why 99% of men find feminism annoying and the other 1% are just trying to smash. Here's his opening statement from the feminism article I just mentioned, which I thought was pretty funny. Quote, "Why are women in bars? I mean, I know they're allowed to be in bars. It's the law, but why do they even bother? Isn't it like gay marriage? You want the right to do it, but don't actually want to literally do it. Bars are about poisoning your body and arguing about politics, which, when you get right down to it, is arguing about numbers. Women aren't predisposed to either of those things. So why do they do it? They do it because it's empowering to be a man. So they sugarcoat the booze, add some food coloring, and dive into a numbers fight. I was at a pub the other night, and that girl who always talks about being raped showed up. I think her name was Megan I was raped. Within about 10 minutes of meeting her, she made it clear to the table that she had been raped by blurting out, "I was raped." This instantly had the desired effect and made us treat her with kid gloves because of the oppressive oppression that permeates every aspect of her life. It was like she took a pill and instantly became black. In 2013, he'd write an article called Tackling Asian Privilege. He basically took an article complaining about white privilege and took the word white and did a find and replace with Asian, and it actually still works, so he just released it. This led to online backlash from the cyber Asian community. His work at Talkie Mag parlayed him into a recurring guest role on the late-night political talk show Red Eye, as well as Hannity on Fox. Now, so far this video has been a little light on the clips, but we're about to get into Gavin's content creator arc, and there's a ton of clips that are just funny and worth bringing up from Red Eye and Hannity, which are like pretty popular and part of his lore, so they're definitely worth diving into. So you know what that means? It's clip time. Here's a clip of Gavin almost getting taken out by the Jew.
Gavin, does the lawyer have a case given the history between Jews and Arabs?
Sort of. I mean, you're not supposed to say it, but one of the biggest problems with Jews is... What the hell was that? It's bleeding right now.
Here's a super infamous clip of Gavin telling a feminist how to find meaning and enlightenment as a woman.
Most women are happier at home. They are pretending that they like working, and they're not making money because they don't stay all night at the office. They don't go the extra mile. They don't work all weekend. You're making a mistake. You would be much happier at home with a husband and children.
Oh boy. Oh.
I mean, I'm literally shaking.
You just said you're single. You don't have a boyfriend. You're what?
That's
you're celibate?
my choice.
Yeah. Look, you're miserable. You would be so much happier with kids around you tonight. Imagine coming home, mommy's home.
You know what, Gavin? You're not funny. You're not what you do not do anything.
I'm trying to make you happy.
You do not do anything for the better. Sean, this isn't funny.
Feminism has made women miserable. Women were much happier when housewives were glorified.
Guess what? I had a choice to be married, and I chose not to. I have a choice to have kids.
You made a mistake.
Here's another clip that got him in hot water where he advocates for abolishing food stamps because he's never seen a skinny poor person before. All of America's homeless are fat. That's his argument.
But we cannot demonize food stamps and the children who are depending on them. The millions of
Have you seen them? They're gigantic.
No, you can't point to the surfer and point to the Dominican Republic person who's doing this.
America. We're
absolutely not. Talk to a hungry child.
I'd love to
their
meet one.
mother who cannot afford
I can't talk to them. They're too big. They can't get off their chair.
Because you're slightly privileged, I would think, that you're not coming in contact with people who are hungry.
Have you ever
it
seen a skinny, poor American child?
Well, you can point to the abuse in the system.
Obesity is a big problem when it comes to actually the food that they have access to in these stores that accept food
the
stamps.
Sheer volume
there's
of it.
a lot of issues with
I think
it.
there's
It's
a way
not
to
volume.
acknowledge.
They're hungry children.
Oh, it's just a fat pill.
Guys, there's a way to acknowledge.
He got caught racially profiling Neil deGrasse Tyson.
And he talks about things like, when I was young in New York, I would get racially profiled when I go into stores. Back then, he looked like he was in the Warriors. He had a huge afro and a cut-off shirt, and New York was a war zone. Sorry, you fit the profile.
In 2013, Gavin had a debate with a law professor on his aforementioned views of women in the workforce, which led to this clip that he took a lot of heat for.
Because Gavin is, in fact, presenting what's wrong with masculinity right now. It's this insistence that things have to be a certain way. What does his evidence for that?
I'm not insisting anything, you f***ing idiot.
Oh,
Gavin,
take it down.
And finally, here's a clip of Gavin gingerly telling his female co-host the finer points on how the divorce system actually works.
Look, the alimony concept was invented when it was the Nona cooking a spaghetti the whole life, and then she gets a band. She goes, I made spaghetti for you guys my whole life, and now I don't know have the skills. But now that women are working in the real world...
I didn't realize that's what it was. I'm so glad
Yes.
you
I didn't realize alimony was invented in Italy.
Yeah.
It was invented for
It was called
immigrants.
alimonia.
It was invented for old-fashioned moms. We got new moms. You want equality? You don't get alimony. Sorry.
Gavin has this way of speaking in clickbait headlines. He reels people in using outlandish statements as bait, then makes fairly cogent arguments, but by this time it's already gotten under the skin of his opponents, who are enraged and are no longer open to trying to decode his arguments, making them, to the viewers, look silly or irate, and him look in control, while the entire exchange is being driven by his charm, quick wit, and his sense of humor. It's a big part of why Andrew Tate ended up getting so popular, because if you have like a Venn editor, Chris, if you could actually just bring down a Venn diagram diagram for me right here. Okay, so if you have being funny, being in control, and being right, you only need two of the three of those things to like win an argument in a debate. And Gavin is often funny and often in control. It's part of the reason why Moist Critical lost to Sneeko, who was literally advocating for minor attracted people whilst being red-pilled, which is insane. But being funny and in control can only take you so far because there's a line you don't cross. There's two lines you don't cross. And one line goes like this, and the other line comes up the middle to make a capital T. And that capital T stands for trans. And if I've learned anything in life, is that you never cross the trans line for some reason. I don't know how that happened. On August the 12th, 2014, Gavin wrote a blog for thoughtcatalog.com titled Transphobia is Perfectly Natural. I'm sure you could expect what the backlash would be here. Refinery29.com called Gavin, quote, the worst person in media, saying, quote, McInnes does more than say that transphobia is natural. He basically requests that transsexuals get their very own DSM diagnosis. Which is funny, in a circle of irony type of way, as gender dysphoria is actually classified as a mental illness in the DSM-5, but I digress. Salon.com posted, quote, a plea to Thought Catalog to remove Gavin McInnes' transphobic essay from its website. Advocate.com wrote, quote, did Thought Catalog just publish the most transphobic article ever? Stranger.com called it, quote, the most transphobic article ever written. Even another writer at Thought Catalog wrote a counter essay stating, quote, the article was so steeped in arguments that could be countered with even the laziest Googling, lack of coherent point, and such a level of ignorance it defies explanation. Unless you really saw what was happening, either the saddest attempt to be edgy and controversial, or someone who was legitimately so terrified of trans people, he went crazy. You get the point. People were pissed. They-thems were pissed. Truthfully, I've never even heard of thoughtcatalog.com before I started reading these counter articles that other people were making. And solely based on that, the vibe I get from the website at the time is that it was like a pro-free speech platform. Keep in mind, this is when free speech was like a liberal kind of talking point. Now it's kind of gone over to the right. Things flip-flop. I don't know when they made a rebranding or if Gavin's essay had an effect, but now they post things like 6 of the cutest TV couples and 5 TV character duos who are the definition of platonic soulmates. Just a bunch of Yas Queen ass bullshit. Quick side note, a lot of Gavin's articles on Thought Catalog are actually really funny. Another one that got him in trouble was titled, hey ladies, short hair is rape. He argues that doggy style with a chick who got a pixie cut is like sodomizing a young boy, but back to transphobia is perfectly natural. As for Gavin's essay, it's actually pretty short, so I could read the whole thing here in its entirety. It wouldn't take that long, but my channel would be treated like it worked for the Clintons. It is really funny though. He essentially makes the argument that, disclaimer, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with Gavin necessarily. I'm just recapping what his views are within the article. So YouTube, don't delete me. He essentially makes the argument that removing vital reproductive organs and transforming them into something that looks like the genitalia of the opposite gender, albeit non-functional genitalia, is probably a bad idea, especially if gender dysphoria is a mental illness. Like if your friend went crazy and told you he wanted to get his nose removed because he felt like a noseless person on the inside, this would be a situation to be afraid of, ergo, transphobia is natural. His solution? Be a gay drag queen. That was basically Gavin's argument. Also, the whole thing was wrapped in this layer of post-ironically advocating to normalize being trans, while the subtext removing any ideology from the article either way. It's just actually really well written. Like he's, I don't know, sarcastically arguing with a liberal friend at a bar. You know, I'll share this final paragraph from the essay because I think it does a good job at encapsulating his thoughts throughout the entire thing. And it actually ends on a pretty empathetic tone in a Gavin sort of way. Quote, buying women parts from a hospital and calling herself a broad trivializes what it is to be a woman. Womanhood is not on a shelf next to the wigs and makeup. Similarly, being a dude is quite involved. Ripping your vaginal canal out of your fly doesn't mean you're gonna start inventing shit and knowing how cement works. Being a man is awesome. So is being a woman. We should revere these creations, not revel in their bastardizations. Being gay is a weird quirk that happens at birth. It's like being an albino. If you're born that way, you shouldn't fight it. You don't need to change who you are. In fact, doing so is sexist, misandrist, homophobic, and further damages the lives of the men. The rest of the article is admittedly pretty harsh, so I doubt anyone who was outraged would have had the open-mindedness to realize it was actually an olive branch coming from across the river, kind of. Needless to say, everyone was mad at Gavin. He caught major heat, and Rooster New York, and the parent company Gavin had sold it to, told him there was no hard feelings, but they needed to let him go. Volume 4, the Gavin v. CopperCab issue. With Gavin once again needing to find a dang job, he decides to expand upon his hilarious appearances on Fox News and JRE to create his own show, broadcasting his controversial thoughts and opinions to the world. On June 15th, 2015, he signed a deal with Compound Media to help him produce The Gavin McInnes Show. Compound Media was the network of a freshly fired Anthony Cumia, who, much like Gavin, was expanding upon his own time being a host at O&A and creating an entire network of shows. Cumia, also a Fox News contributor, had met Gavin on set. The two would bond, leading to Gavin signing over at Compound. If you're a fan of Gavin's comedy, then The Gavin McInnes Show is exactly what you think it was. Angry Scottish rants on things happening in the news and pop culture, clickbait-style monologues that made tangible arguments once you look past him saying something wild. He'd have fan call-ins, one of whom was a young high school student, Nick Fuentes, who ironically wanted to talk about a recent Kanye outburst.
I was wondering, what do you think about Kanye West? Because I know you love entrepreneurs, I love entrepreneurs, and everyone seems to think he's a jerk, but I don't know, I think it's kind of refreshing that he's damn good and he knows it and he tells everyone about it.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I would feel very weird putting him on our stain list. He doesn't seem to belong, and he did lose $50 million.
Gavin would also have guests on the show, including the likes of Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Adam Carolla, Jimmy Kimmel, Gad Saad, Tim Dillon, Anthony Cumia, David Duke, and a freshly canceled Sam Hyde on his December the 15th episode in 2015, just 10 days out from being canceled at Adult Swim.
I forgot exactly what I did, but I just shrugged him off in a rude way on email like a year and a half ago. And I think that might be where this started. Like, I think he's got, these people hold grudges for a long time. These people
vindictive
for a long time, if you know what I'm saying.
But one show was not enough for our trusty orator. Gavin double-dipped in the media salsa bowl and became a contributor for right-wing Canadian media outlet Rebel News. He began producing talking head video content for their YouTube channel, which was like a short-form version of what he was doing over at Compound. He'd launch a series of black and white interviews on his YouTube channel called Free Speech. They'd be in a more intellectual setting with guests like Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith. One of the most memorable interviews from Free Speech was with Heather Marie Skoll. Unlike everyone else previously named, she is a nobody. This is some random liberal artsy Jewish chick that he found on the sidewalk of New York.
I saw her on the street near my house. She was putting up this sticker, and it says, "It's from one white person to another. It's on us to end white supremacy." I thought that was very interesting, and saw her at a coffee shop and said, "I'd love to have you on the show to explain the sort of mentality behind the sticker." And here she is.
I don't actually know if she's Jewish, but I mean, look at her hair. Come on. What makes this interview so compelling is her response to one of Gavin's stances that he's had throughout the years that he's been like pretty adamant about, but it gets discussed on the show. And that stance is that there's a supply and demand problem with white supremacy. That white people are literally addicted to white guilt, looking for the next white, racist KKK member to aim their ire at. But this is no longer the antebellum South, and high-level racism is so rare it's considered negligible. And that's why white libtards call everything racist and literally Hitler, because the demand to ostracize a KKK member far outweighs the supply of actual skinheads. And Heather believes that white people are racism personified. Also, she has no idea who Gavin is. Just to break the fourth wall here, I wrote this down in the script as he slow rolls her into a sit-down interview and then flips the whole thing on its head and dismantles her entire worldview. I was just writing that off recollection of seeing the interview. Now that I'm recording this video and have rewatched the interview, that is not true. He goes in on her pretty quickly. It's like within minutes, he kind of just starts questioning everything about her worldview. It's pretty funny. I would recommend seeking out the entire thing, but it's a little hard to find, to be honest with you. It's been taken down in most places, so good luck. But I'll leave you all with this clip of Gavin trapping her into believing that Caucasian countries are superior.
I don't think we should be ashamed of ourselves. I think that we should take responsibility for the system that we've created.
The best system in the world?
We do not have the best system in the world.
Who has a better system?
There are many European countries that are much better off than us.
Oh, you mean like the European countries with a higher density of whites, like Northern Europe?
That's one way to phrase it, I guess.
You don't mean Turkey.
No.
You don't mean Eastern Europe
No.
with the communists. So the only time you can come up with a system that's better than America, it's a country that's more white than America.
On August 23rd, 2017, Gavin would release his final episode of The Gavin McInnes Show on Compound and also resign from his segments on Rebel News as he had signed a big deal with Conservative Review Television, or CRTV. He launched the show Get Off My Lawn, or GOML, which would effectively be the same thing as the show he had on Compound. CRTV would end up merging with Blaze TV, the content arm of Glenn Beck's media outlet The Blaze. With CRT and Blaze TV's merger, the site would be rebranded to Blaze Media. Now, my favorite part of this era has got to be Gavin's anime battle arc with the mentally ill ginger, Scott Sullivan. I mean, CopperCab. All jokes aside, honestly, look at them side by side. They legit could be cousins. To be honest, Gavin's feud with Copper is like 80% of the reason why I even wanted to make this video in the first place. Before I even knew who Gavin really was or was familiar with his content, I had gone out and got shit-faced with some friends and ended up crashing on one of my buddy's couches at his condo. The next morning, we cracked some beers and probably made the greatest salmon omelets my cigarette-stained palate would allow me to taste at the time. And while we were trying to recover our buzz from the night before just to be able to make it through the day, he put on a playlist of the entire Gavin v CopperCab saga. If I'm just being real with you, after this chapter is done, you could probably just turn off the video. We're gonna reach our peak. It's not gonna get any better from here. Well, I mean, I guess Gavin does go on to accidentally start a domestic terrorist cell in the process of trying to get a virgin Jew some pussy, so might as well stick around till the end, I guess. But I digress. CopperCab first went viral for the Gingers Do Have Souls meme in 2014.
Gingers have souls. I go to church. I'm a Christian.
It was a viral sensation, racking up hundreds of millions of views across the internet, which the meme itself was a response to a South Park episode making fun of gingers. But the meme grew so popular, it would end up being parodied by Cartman on South Park. He'd go on posting unhinged ginger soy rants, advocating for social justice ideals. One of the main targets in his videos of people that upset him would end up being Gavin himself. If you made it this far into the video, I'm sure I don't need to explain why. So, Gavin, looking for content, invited CopperCab on episode 83 of The Gavin McInnes Show on January the 26th, 2016 to confront him.
Hey, Copper.
Hello, Gavin.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You look like the Greek god of fire.
Is that because of my red hair?
And your fluorescent pink chemise.
This gets heated pretty quickly, so Gavin tries to extend an olive branch, Gavin style.
Michael, I want you to get laid, okay? I can tell you don't get laid a lot. When you do all this white knight shit, it turns pussies dry. If you
I'm not white knight, okay?
If you want to get laid, you gotta grow balls. When you do this shit, women don't want to you. Even the biggest feminists, their boyfriends are bikers. You need to grow your hair long, get a leather vest, and sit on a crotch rocket.
I'm proud to be a social justice warrior, okay? Everyone keeps calling me that in the comments, and
no one is gonna you ever!
Copper goes on to call out Gavin for being a misogynist for his highlight reel of destroying feminists, and the conversation gets heated once again.
You know, you're making everyone else look bad. I mean, when
I'm making everyone look bad. You're the guy with cum dripping out of his mouth every time you talk.
That's not cum, that's spit!
Why is it so viscous?
Not because of people like you.
It was dangling on your chin. I could see there was white in it.
Okay, girlfriend. Look,
those are the sperms.
when you're attacking women, you're attacking my mother. You're attacking my
Your mother's
you're-
dead, asshole.
What?
Isn't your mother dead?
Yes, she is dead.
So how am I attacking her?
It has nothing to do. That's neither here nor there. That's not right. I don't know why you would even bring that up.
Well, you're calling me a mother, and I'm like, you're calling me a necrophiliac.
I guess I get offended easily when I'm touchy because I have a lot of women in my family. I've been raised by mostly women.
Yeah, and look what they've done. They've made a sub. You're below a gay.
I'm not a sub. I don't appreciate that term. Okay.
Sorry, sub-homo. You've been castrated, and I don't think you're beyond the point of no return. Step 1, you got to get a house with some dudes, a shitty apartment, sleep by the furnace. Step 2, you got to get a dishwashing job. You'll get bare minimum wage, you'll do okay, and you'll learn to riff in the kitchen. And you'll learn to hang out with black people who will help you with your testosterone problem. Step 3, you got to get a vehicle, a motorbike. I know it's not going to be anything fancy, 50 cc's will do. Step 4, you're going to get a BJ, and you'll see what they feel like to actually receive them instead of give them. And then that pink cardigan's going to be replaced with a nice flannel, and you're going to be a man.
Copper would then do a few more appearances, one of which acts as kind of an addendum to their last interaction. On February 11th, 2016, Gavin tells a somewhat calmer Copper the steps he needs to take to become a man.
Step 1, we got to get you out of Mima's house. So in this montage, you should have you say you have a place in LA. Let's see you in your place in LA. Step 2, you need a motorized vehicle. I'm not asking for a Harley. I want a motorcycle.
Motorcycle?
Yes, moped will be fine, 50 cc's. Women love being on the back of those things because it vibrates their clits.
I have a Honda moped.
It puts a Pavlovian thing in their mind where they go, when I'm with Ginger, my clit vibrates.
Well, I can take the f***ing moped because I got one, Gavin.
Okay, I didn't understand that, but anyway, get one of those. And then boxing. Now, we're not asking you to become an MMA champion. We want you to join a local gym, and you don't have to jump in the ring every 10 seconds. What we want you to do is just spar, just hit the heavy bag, just learn some combinations, and do that thrice a week for 10 minutes.
The crazy thing about that is
And
I've been doing that.
Invest in some brassieres.
You see my muscle? I've been doing that, Gavin. I've been working out every day.
You need a German bra. You know what they call German bras? Das should stop them from flopping.
The next chapter of this saga takes place on episode 190 on August the 1st, 2016. Copper calls into the show to announce that he is now a transgender woman named Claire.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm just very anxious right now.
That's fair, I understand. Is this your first official coming out as a woman?
Yes, sir. It is.
I want to be as respectful as possible, Claire. Should I call you a woman? Do I call you trans? Do I call you she?
I would prefer you call me by she.
Can we see you in your dress?
Sure.
Why are you crying? Claire, you look wonderful. Claire, you're a Southern belle. Do you have any wigs at your house? Can you put one on? I'm having trouble with the mental picture of you as a woman with that hairdo.
Hold on 1 second.
It's the same hairdo as the guy who realigned my truck on Thursday.
Gavin, much like myself, was calling BS on Copper's transition, so when Claire returns without a wig, Gavin begins to press her.
I couldn't see your eyes before you left the room, and now I can see that they have tears. It just seems curious that you left the room and then now you have visible tears, and I couldn't see the tears before you left. And it also seems weird that you'd only have one wig when a wig is $20 and you're making such a massive transition. I'm also curious why you wouldn't have any makeup on. It doesn't seem like you're very committed, which is why one of the biggest problems I had with trans the whole time is that there seems to be a distinct lack of effort here. If you're going to do something as huge as leave a gender, that's like leaving a planet. And then you see these people who leave the planet and they haven't even packed their bags. You don't go on a spaceship in sweatpants. You pack your bags.
Is that what you want, Gavin? Is that what you want? You say that everyone's like, you always think I'm a trolling. That's why I don't come on your show, because I'm having a panic attack right now. You don't even give me any kind of...
Your eyes aren't bloodshot, and I've seen a tit like that on you a million times. Let's get a better look, please. I want to believe you.
Unfortunately for Claire, the estrogen was giving her heart complications, and she was forced to detransition back into a cisgender guy. Throughout the rest of 2016, 2017, and 2018, Copper would make sparse appearances on the Gavin McInnes show, which pretty much all went as expected.
Why are you always drenched in cum? It's distracting, and you're the one who started with the cock-sucking analogies.
So I'm doing satire. You ever heard of funny before? You humorless, ugly bitch. I thought you were a woman. What happened to your tits?
I have tits, Gavin, okay? I have tits, but I'm working out and I'm getting in shape.
I haven't made a video in 5 months because I've been going through HRT because I'm transgender.
Those are nice little A cups.
What the funny? Laughing at my body? You gonna shame me? I got a board of inspiration to come back at you with. You come at me, I've got good vibes and good energy.
Found a girlfriend who will peg you. That's quite an accomplishment.
No, that's my sister. That's my half-sister Aubrey, you idiot. Do some better research.
But did you say on your show that you guys were dating?
No, we're not dating. I never once said that we're dating.
Why do you try to
say that?
Why do you try to kiss her all the time then, you weird fat creep with a woman symbol in your head?
Because I love her and she's beautiful and she doesn't mind if I kiss her.
And then boxing. Now, we're not asking you to become an MMA champion. We want you to join a local gym and you don't have to jump in the ring every 10 seconds. What we want you to do is just spar, just hit the heavy bag, just learn some combinations and do that thrice a week for 10 minutes.
Gavin. You think that you can get banned from Twitter, okay? The moment I start getting fucking ripped, you think you're gonna just fucking run away? Tuck your tail between your legs and scurry off like a little dirt rodent? You think you can run from me? I earned this fight. I deserve a fight with you, Gavin, a proper fight. In the ring, New York, I'll come to you, Gavin. I want it, Gavin. I want it!
I'm coming for you, CopperCab. You keep defendgavin.com out your mouth.
In a world where controversy reigns supreme, two titans of the internet are set to collide in a mediocre showdown. Gavin McInnes, the former voice of Vice, a man unafraid to advocate for transphobia, steps into the ring. But standing across the canvas is the jacked ginger joker, CopperCab. He/she took the internet by storm, briefly, with his/her unwavering support for soulless Auburn animals.
You know, I'm the ginger Martin Luther King.
This is more than just a boxing match. This is a clash of ideologies. A proud boy versus social justice personified. Testosterone takes on gynecomastia. McInnes, with his sharp wit, faces CopperCab, whose raw emotions have captivated tens, possibly even hundreds.
Every day I'm at the gym practicing feminism, okay?
On one side, a seasoned provocateur, a man who has built his career on convincing you that anything is gay. On the other, a flash-in-the-pan internet sensation, a voice for the soulless, ready to prove that he's a man who enjoys more than just kissing his sister. Two men, one ring, no holds barred, except for the rules that they had agreed upon. This is the content you have been waiting for. Words turn to fists, and only one will emerge victorious, which is obviously going to be Gavin. McInnes, CopperCab, God is in heaven, and all is right in the world.
Yeah, the fight was pretty boring. It kind of sucked. There's no real good way to transition out of this. So Gavin won, and moving on. Now, I feel like I gotta say this. I hate to be the guy to expose that a magic trick is even a magic trick. I like watching people enjoy magic. I don't feel like I need to tell them these things, but undoubtedly a lot of people in the comments are gonna call me like a retard if I don't mention this. Like, oh, how'd you not notice? CopperCab is a troll. He's a very high level troll. He stays in character most of the time, as far as I can tell, as far as I've been able to see, me personally. But yeah, he's a troll. He's playing a character. This isn't actually him. He's not some psycho leftoid. He's actually just like a really interesting content creator, someone who I might actually be interested in making a full video repertoire on.
That was fun. I have no idea if that guy is a troll or not. I don't know if he's kidding, and it's weird to argue with someone like that because it's sort of like you're in an improv troupe. So their number one rule is this gay yes and thing where they go, so you got out of prison, and you have to go, yes, and it was real hard. You never say no, I wasn't, because it kills the vibe. So am I having fun with a fellow actor? Or am I trying to school a retard?
We will not be silenced in the face of your violence.
Volume 5, The Proud of My Boy issue.
What is more annoying? Can't we just fight? In my day, the Nazi skinheads would come up to your show, beat up everyone, and leave. You'd still have a great night. It was only 10 minutes. Let's just fight and get it over with. You can even win. I'll let you win. Just shut up.
In 2016, during his time working on the Gavin McInnes show on Anthony Cumia's Compound Media, there was an employee working at the network named Ben Ratner, aka The Rat.
Little kid, we actually hired him just because his name was Ratner, and we wanted to call him Rat, like in Fast Times. Hey, Rat, why don't you turn on the camera?
Ratner was kind of a gangly little Jewy beta boy who had trouble with women and liked going to see Broadway musicals in the city. You know, a little light in the loafers. Gavin has this infatuation with finding weak young boys and trying to mold them into men. It's not a gay groomer thing. This is my opinion, but I think that he believes men have become weak. And as a man who wants to see society thrive and prosper, especially Western society, he wants to do everything within his power to lend a hand to confused young men and help them become confident, functioning members of Western civilization. But obviously this is all subtextual, and on the surface level, it's an excuse for Gavin to be mean. This would also be true in the case of Ratner. Gavin, wanting him to blossom into a full-blown man, would constantly goof on the boy behind the scenes.
So he would always go to Broadway plays, so Gavin started getting music from musicals and playing it to him like, hey, look at this, you pussy, you know, is this what you like? And one of them was Proud of Your Boy.
Of course, Gavin, the godfather of hipsters, would find a deep cut like Proud of Your Boy to make fun of him with. Proud of Your Boy was originally slated to be a musical number in the 1992 Disney movie Aladdin. The song would end up being left on the cutting room floor during production, but would be included in the 2011 Broadway musical adaptation. Around this time, Gavin attended his daughter's recital where one of the boys in her class sang Proud of Your Boy. Gavin recollects on the moment of hearing this song in an interview with Bedford and Bowery saying, quote, I was sitting in the audience just thinking, if there's one song that would make a father totally devoid of pride, it would be this Proud of Your Boy. And we all just became obsessed with it. The way the lyrics are so fake, humble, and self-serving, it really sounds like this self-obsession you get from a lot of people these days. They just assume that the world revolves around them, and it's really funny. That song, we just can't get enough of it. So we declared it the most annoying song in the world, and we sing it all the time. So Gavin would use this abhorrent song and dance number that should have remained in the Disney vault to tease Ratner in the hopes of raising his testosterone levels. And that, my friends, evolved into the boys club called Proud Boys.
We ought to make a club called the Proud Boys, and that way you can learn how to be a man. And, you know, you'll get chicks and tattoos and, you know, drink beer and hang out with guys. As a joke, it was like this parody of a men's club. So ludicrous, so ridiculous, such a parody. And slowly this fucking thing mutated.
Now, Proud Boys clearly started off as a parody of a men's club / actually being a men's club with the goal of men being men.
So we made up these rules. There's just like the Knights of Columbus, there's first degree, second degree, third degree. What's the second degree, Gav? And I went, you have to get beaten up by 5 men. For how long?
until you can name 5 breakfast cereals. Done. 3rd degree. What's a 3rd degree, Gav? You have to quit porn and get a tattoo. Done.
The problem is what it would evolve into, and even though Gavin has since left the group, he played a major part in sowing its seeds of self-destruction. Outside of Gavin being a content creator, a media personality if you will, he also started espousing his political views on a nationwide speaking tour at college campuses. In true godfather of hipster fashion, Gavin and a handful of other now cancelled conservative personalities like Milo Yiannopoulos invented the framework for what would evolve into Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro owns libtarb compilation YouTube videos. These speeches were taking place in the 2015-2016 era, where the country was a powder keg for the socio-political divide that we're experiencing currently. This was prime Donald Trump era, or as I like to call it, the PDT, when he was still running for office, when politicians still had zero idea how to dismantle someone who had no respect for political decorum.
Temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
At the time, the woke mind virus had already infected the education institutions, but had been going by a different name at the time, social justice warriors, or SJWs. The SJWs of yesteryear were just as intolerant, ignorant, hateful, radicalized, and aggressive as the wokies are today. Actually, you might be able to make the argument that it was more radicalized and more violent back then, because since that 2016 era, the whole woke movement has been adopted by corporations who are trying to repackage it and repurpose it for more sinister means. Being woke has been corporatized. They smoothed down all the rough edges, repackaged and mass marketed it, making it less punk and more pop. I think this might be why you're seeing Kamala Harris promoting woke ideologies, while the pro-Palestine types are calling the Democrats murderers and Nazis, etc. It's created this divide amongst the left wing. Think, reading Marvel comic books in the 1990s versus being a fan of Phase 5 MCU movies. Not all SJWs or wokies are violent, ugly, and unwashed. Most of them are just ugly and unwashed. And all of them are unwashed. But a small contingent of them are violent radicals. For the sake of this video, we're gonna call them Antifa, aka anti-fascists. Also, many of them were Antifa, so it just actually does fit. Antifa is a radical group that should be considered domestic terrorists in my opinion, but aren't technically, due to them being a decentralized group, but that's a topic for another video. Over the years, Antifa have violently protested, militantly attacked public infrastructure, occupied city spaces. If you've ever seen a black-clad and masked individual trying to shut down and drown out anyone who has an opinion that's different than theirs, that's probably Antifa. Because no Antifa members showing up at his college speeches trying to drown him out for wrong think would over time escalate into something more vile. Because when Antifa became more militant and violent towards Gavin, Gavin knew who was underneath those military masks. Upper class, fatherless, unwashed uggos who have no personality and are too entitled to build anything for themselves. Therefore, they feel the need to become part of a hive mind because it's way easier than developing skills and becoming an individual. But Gavin, as a man, felt completely unthreatened. If a bully's goal is to get a response, to get a rise out of people, when Gavin showed he was unbothered, the bullies, aka Antifa, escalated things into violence. They began attacking him at his speaking engagements. Event after event would be disrupted or shut down, preventing Gavin from giving his speeches. He had become public enemy number one with Antifa, who backed him into a corner. With the rising levels of vitriol and violence stemming from Antifa, Gavin employed the Proud Boys as a sort of security guard / militia, if you will.
And Antifa would show up to protest him and try to shut down the event. So then the Proud Boys would go and protect Gavin so he wouldn't get harmed doing these speaking engagements. So then it turned into this, because they're fighting with Antifa, they must be the fascists, the Nazis. And once that gets out there, there's no pulling it back. You could try to explain how you're not a Nazi till you're blue in the fucking face. It ain't going away.
And this is where I think Gavin made a critical error, writing the first chapter in the Proud Boys' tale of their downward spiral. The Proud Boys would adopt the gold-piped Perry Ellis polo shirts as their fatigue and defend their fearless leader with counter-offensive tactics. Now, if Gavin had hired a professional security firm, for instance, their first order of business is to protect their client. They might do so by distraction, de-escalation, removing their client from the dangerous situation, etc. The problem with hiring the Proud Boys is that they are emotionally invested. Not only is the client their Führer, they also view the attackers as their political enemies. And they're fully aware that underneath Antifa's clandestine operator attire, they're all gay pussies. Meaning if that there was any hint of resistance or violence stemming from the protesters, the Proud Boys would use this as an excuse to just beat the shit out of them because they could. And it was fun. Gavin would get pepper sprayed outside of NYU. He'd get into a kerfuffle at the Deplorable, which, in fairness, he did seem to throw the first punch on that one. There was an incident at the Berkeley protest. There was a protest in Halifax, Canada. Everywhere Gavin went, Antifa followed. And so did the fists of the Proud Boys. To be clear, my stance here is that this is not good. I think that it's pretty evident to me that Gavin and the Proud Boys are the ones being antagonized here, but I think riling up your fan base to go on the counter-offensive in the short term might seem like a good idea, but in the long run, it only ends up escalating things, and violence just begets more violence. And this credence to react violently would also be baked into the infrastructure of the group itself. As radical tension rose in America, thanks to some notable events like the shooting of Trayvon Martin, the Unite the Right rally, Donald Trump getting elected, the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the SPLC, called the Proud Boys a hate group, and the Anti-Defamation League, or the ADL, described them as extremist conservatives. Both Canadian and New Zealand governments labeled them as a terrorist organization, but back in America, the FBI would label the Proud Boys as an extremist group, though they would walk this one back and instead apply that label only to a handful of members instead of the group as a whole. It also didn't help that Gavin was saying things like this no more. And all the heat surrounding the group would culminate with an incident taking place at the Metropolitan Republican Club in Manhattan in October of 2018. Gavin was scheduled to give a talk at the club, and knowing that Antifa was going to be there, he wanted to piss them off. When he exited his car, he was wearing glasses that made his eyes look Asian and racist, as well as sporting a katana. The police on the scene would rush Gavin inside the venue, and whilst inside, Gavin and an Asian Proud Boy member reenacted the 1960 assassination of Inakiro Asanuma, then leader of the Japanese Socialist Party. What happens next is honestly a little confusing. What I get mixed up on is who actually started the incident. A brawl broke out outside the event between 4 Antifa members and 10 Proud Boys. From what I can tell in the security cam footage, it looks like Antifa instigated the situation by throwing at least one bottle at some Proud Boy members who were off screen. Then in retaliation, they beat the shit out of them. Like bad, as in stomping them out. I can't show this on YouTube, so it's currently blurred out right now, but that's what's happening. But this is only what I'm able to see from the security footage that I found. I've seen it in writing that there's other security footage videos that show the Proud Boys clearly instigating the fight, but I have not been able to find that evidence. 10 Proud Boys were arrested, 7 of which were charged with lesser offenses, including rioting and disorderly conduct, while the other 3 were charged with more serious crimes, but all 3 of them managed to strike plea deals for lesser attempted assault charges, serving no jail time and 5 days community service. And those plea deals came about because the 4 victim Antifa members who were masked at the time refused to come forward and reveal their identities, which is why it makes the instigating incident even more murky for me. I saw Antifa start it. There's claims that say the opposite that I cannot corroborate, and no one showed up for the trial, so it never really kind of took place. They just struck plea deals, so make your own judgment on this one. With the arrests and the court cases taking place, and at the behest of Gavin's lawyer, he would end up leaving the group in 2018 as there was just way too much heat surrounding them, though he would still publicly declare his support for the members during the trial. In August of 2019, 2 Proud Boy members would be tried for the very same brawl and be convicted with attempted gang assault, and rioting, serving 4 years in prison. With Gavin now parting ways with the group, they'd seem to march on a path of destruction all by themselves, because on January 6, 2021, they'd play a role in storming the Capitol, with many of the once men's club members being convicted of felonies and now serving double-digit years in state penitentiaries. Volume 6, The Censored Issue. After the fallout of the Proud Boys, this left Gavin on shaky grounds, because he sarcastically started a violent extremist hate group. He'd be banned from various online platforms in symphony with each other: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, PayPal, MailChimp, iTunes. This would lead to him filing an anti-defamation lawsuit against the SPLC for labeling the Proud Boys a hate group, which directly affected his business. Shortly after Blaze TV's merger with CRTV, the new management would drop Gavin from the network, leaving him mostly deplatformed and without a home for his content. So in 2019, Gavin launched his own network of shows, not unlike his friend Anthony Cumia's, which at the time was called freespeech.tv, which would quickly be rebranded due to legal issues to censored.tv. He'd relaunch Get Off My Lawn on the network alongside a live variant of the show called Get Off My Lawn Live. This was a major project for him, branching out on his own, having other shows piggyback off his success.
It's already started. Oh my God, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry about this. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. Whoa. And there it is.
And would even say during the build-up to his fight with CopperCab that the whole thing was really just to promote the launching of his network.
But with CopperCab, I thought it'd be a good way to launch the site.
Gavin would hire Ryan Katsu-Rivera as his producer / co-host of Get Off My Lawn, who is pretty funny in his own right. On top of running the tech behind the show, he's constantly interjecting with these really good impressions that have like an AI face cloning thing going on top of that. We saw an example of this earlier with his John Taffer rap battle. Some notable standouts for me was him doing like an alternate universe Tim Pool if he was also Jesse Lee Peterson.
We'll look into it, but frankly, stay with us till the next break. All right, Tim Pool out. Jesse Lee Peterson Pool out.
He does a pretty spot on Artie Lang, who was talking anime.
What's your favorite anime?
Oh, anime? I like Dragon Ball.
Trick question, they're all gay.
Akira, what?
Skeet Davidson.
I don't know if you've heard about this Kanye thing, but he's not exactly my biggest fan.
Remember when you told Kanye to get on his meds and said you're on meds too? It's awesome. It's no big deal.
Yeah. I'm not consistent. I just, I'm just a dude. Just little P.D. Davidson.
And MDE's own Nick Rochefort.
Hooters has chicks with huge tits serving you food and having a great time with you and laughing and stuff like that, jiggling their little butts around when they're serving you your food. Waffle House has indestructible employees. So you can throw whatever you want at them and try to harm them, and they will defend themselves and get a lot of money with GoFundMe, and they'll be better off for it. So go into Waffle House, order all the shit that we just said, and throw stuff at them. They love it.
I was going to use that last clip as a way to segue into a clip of Ryan showing Gavin Fish Tank Season 1. For all you Fish Tank fans out there, he tried to get Gavin into Fish Tank Season 1, but Gavin, unsurprisingly, just didn't really understand what was going on. But apparently that clip doesn't exist anywhere anymore. I couldn't find it for the life of me, so it exists. It's out there. If you find it, let me know, I guess. He'd produced many other shows on his network, including from the likes of Milo Yiannopoulos, comedian Owen Benjamin, and even CopperCab himself. From here on out, Gavin's career would be pretty tame for his standards. It's been a few years since he's caused some kind of mass public outrage or started a terrorist group. But as of me recording this, he does have 2 more controversial moments that we need to cover. On August 27th, 2022, on an episode of Get Off My Lawn, Gavin would oddly fake his own arrest on air.
Hello. We're shooting a show. Can we do this another time? Yeah.
All right, I'm happy to do that. I'll get a lawyer and we will sit down and have a conversation. We'll schedule a meeting and we'll sit down with my lawyer. I didn't let you in.
In hindsight, it seemed like he just wanted to go on vacation, but did it in the most WWE way possible. Many outlets reported on this, even Tim Pool himself fell for it and did a segment on his show, but the whole ruse would get blown when Owen Benjamin leaked DMs from Gavin confirming the hoax. On December the 5th of that same year, Gavin would famously interview Ye. This was peak Yitler era, fresh off the Death Con tweet, post Drink Champs episode being removed, and only a couple of days after the Alex Jones episode.
First episode of Saving Ye, where I am going to prevent Ye West from becoming an anti-Semite or a Nazi. I'm going to talk him off the ledge and bring him back to the understanding that our problem is liberal elites of all races. Kamala Harris is a major problem.
Gavin's goal, like many during this era, was trying to bring Ye a notch down from his Jew hate mania. Ironically, like most things Ye does, he was pretty ahead of his time on this one. If he had waited, I don't know, maybe just 2 years to start attacking der Jude, I think he would have been way more accepted. Like, I think you would have heard a lot of can't tell me nothing at pro-Palestine protests.
They're a tenacious bunch. They are successful whites. I think Jews are doing well because they're just whites that don't drink. If I didn't drink, I'd be president by now.
Gavin begins the interview. Oh, Nick Fuentes was there, by the way. At the time, Ye was still running for president and got Nick Fuentes on board as like an advisor. He's in the room, but it's not integral to the clips. Gavin begins the interview by making the case that even though Jews are overly represented in powerful institutions like Hollywood, the STEM fields, and politics, that those fields all require a pretty high IQ. Jews are pretty smart, ergo, they dominate in those fields. They dominate. But his argument is that those Jews are mostly atheists. Like, they don't even practice the religion. That Ye's ire should be aimed at just liberal elites because Jews would just be way too broad. Like, a lot of the more religious ones tend to be more conservative. And it also makes it impossible for anyone to be on his side.
Tend not really to be Jewish. I call them ginos, Jews in name only. It's liberal elite whites you should have a beef with.
Yeah, but I lump them all in together. That's what I did. That's
good.
That's why the tweet said that, Jewish people.
Okay.
Gavin, using the same argument, tries a new vector of attack, replacing Jews with blacks and being overrepresented in powerful institutions with being overrepresented in murder.
Blacks are overrepresented in violent crime. But when you meet an individual black person, you don't apply that. You start with a fresh slate every time you meet someone. Do you do that with Jews?
Nope.
This intervention isn't going very well.
The interview was exactly like every other Ye interview from this time period. Surface level ideas, delivered in a high pace and disjointed manner, making him sound just a few steps below a schizophrenic word salad. Gavin tries to volley back and forth with Ye, but again, like most recent Ye interviews, he kind of is just talking at you and not with you. On his final attempt, he tries to dig into how Ye, if elected president, would legislate removing power from the Jews.
I think that Jews are very intelligent, but they don't deserve to be in charge of everything because they don't put Christ in.
But how do you legislate that?
They need to work for Christians. Jews should work for Christians. I'll hire a Jewish person in a second. If I knew they weren't a spy and I could look through their phone and follow them to their house and have a camera all in their living room.
In March of 2021, Gavin and Anthony Cumia would relink after many years to co-host a show called Compound Censored. Over the next few years, this would lead to the two of them working more closely behind the scenes, and on June 27th, 2024, Gavin's Censored TV would absorb Compound Media in a merger of the two brands. Gavin is a curious case. He's clearly brilliant and has like a really unique view of the world. Whether or not you agree with it, I feel like there's always something you could take from what he's saying. But as a Hall of Fame satirist, it's extremely difficult for normies to find the line between truth and lie.
You're
literally on your ass for a living. Get up!
I don't think it would be much of an issue if he was strictly doing comedy like Sam Hyde, for instance. With him, much to Ian's dismay, it doesn't really matter what's real as long as it's funny. He's not making statements for the most part. Gavin, on the other hand, is, for a lack of a better term, a political activist. So some things he says are to be taken seriously, but others aren't. If you're not plugged in with him on the regular, or I guess doing hours of autistic research for some dumb YouTube video, it would be nearly impossible to tell Truth Bomb Gavin and Satire Gavin apart, but I don't know, maybe that's the point. Who cares? Just say wild shit and let God iron out the rest.